Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2019 horror comedy anthology film Scare Package. Now this essentially is 7 stories with a wraparound story, so as you can see on the list there it lists 8 stories. However, the second one, Rad Chad's Horror Emporium, is essentially the wraparound story. So we've got 7 tales, 7 different directors, 7 writers, the usual sort of thing. Now I personally am a fan of anthology films, especially horror anthology films. I think they can be really effective. You don't have to have a long attention span, and if they do a story right, you know, a 10 or 15 minute short story, they can really work. And there are many examples out there. Creepshow, Twilight Zone movie, many examples. So I'm always willing to check out horror anthology films, and this one is set in the 80s. The wraparound story essentially is this Rad Chad's Horror Emporium. It's like a video parlour set in the 80s with this guy running it. Some guy turns up to take a job there, etc. And how we get to these stories is essentially people putting videos in the store and stuff, and then the stories start. So that's how you get your story. Now this horror anthology is a little bit up and down at times, but there are definitely some fun and interesting stories here. The first one, Cold Open, tries to be really meta. Now I think it's really old-fashioned to try and be meta sometimes in films, and I don't think this first story particularly worked about this guy trying to avoid all the tropes in horror stories and things like that. However, once we get to One Time in the Woods, I think it really picks up. This one, I think the humour's bang on. It's quite funny, this one. It's the kind of tale where you get people's legs ripped off and the guy complains because he just signed up for a marathon. That's the humour that you're dealing with in this story. It's really stupid humour, but it's really gory and over the top. Essentially about these campers in the woods that get set upon by some creature that can't fully transform, and then some masked killer. All the tropes you can imagine, really over the top gore, and some really fun humorous moments in it, and it was one of my favourite stories. The next one, Mister, I think is the weakest, or certainly one of the weakest, and essentially it's about this guy that tries to join this, you know, men's group, trying to make men, you know, powerful again, and they turn out to be werewolves, pretty crap werewolves, but the werewolves nonetheless. And there's a little twist at the end of that story. I didn't think much of that story at all. Girls' Night Out of the Body is some girls that go into a convenience store to buy some stuff. One of them sees a lollipop, it looks really cool, even though there's a big sign saying do not touch it, it's not yours, not for sale, etc. She steals it, and then weird stuff starts happening. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about this one. Decent moments in this one, but nothing particularly stood out. The Night He Came Back Again was basically it focused heavily on the trope in horror films like Friday the 13th and Halloween, when no matter what you do to these masked killers, they never die. So you've got a whole series of people in this episode doing strange things, well, not strange, doing brutal things to this killer to try and kill him, and he just keeps coming back again and again and again and again, and people getting killed more creatively and gory. Decent story. I actually quite enjoyed this one. It was fun, really over the top gore again, a bit like the earlier One Time in the Woods. So yeah, a decent one, a quite easy one to watch. So Much to Do, I thought was a bit weird. It's about this guy, I don't know, turns into smoke, and this woman swallows up this smoke, so gets possessed by him, and then they have this weird fight back at her apartment. Yeah, I didn't really get this one. So Much to Do, not really one for me, that one. And then the final tale was Horror Hypothesis, and again this pulled on every horror trope you could imagine, and felt like it was parodying films like Cabin in the Woods, all that kind of stuff, and it's basically all these horror cliches in this underground compartment. This killer breaks free, and then they've all got to start surviving. You know, you've got your jock, you've got your virgin, you've got the geek, you've got your stoner, so on and so forth, and the one obviously who is self-aware of everything that's going on and realises they're all in a horror film. So every single trope you could imagine in a horror film was in the final story, and I think it's the longest story, and it was certainly enjoyable to watch, and there were some fun moments in this one as well. So it had its up and downs, this anthology film. I did think there were some fun elements to it. I've seen some pretty cruel reviews of this on IMDb, and I think people need to be a bit more balanced in their approach sometimes to what they're watching. There was certainly some inventive and creative ideas in this horror anthology, and most horror anthologies that you watch, you'll blow hot and cold with some of the stories. There's some that will stand out, and there's some that you can, a bit meh, you could take them or leave them, and this certainly has plenty of those. It's got a lot of stories. It does feel a little bit muddled. How they transition from story to story feels a bit muddled, and you're trying to keep up with right, we're going on to the next story now, and it does feel a little bit, some of the humour feels a little bit immature and ill thought out, but some of it is really funny as well, and makes you giggle. So it does blow hot and cold a little bit. There are some fun elements to this anthology film. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. For that reason, I did enjoy aspects of it. It's a shame that some of them didn't work as well as the others, but it is certainly worth checking out if you like to look and watch anthology films, and you like to see something a little bit new and different. This is certainly one I would suggest checking out if that's the case. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the review, and of course I will be back with more content on Screen Stars very, very soon.